Welcome to Householders, a conversation about American life as Zen practice. I'm Inga Annie Wade.
And I'm Kosetsu John Mitchell, and we're lay members of the Atlanta Soto Zen Center.
Today on the show, we have a special guest on the show today. It's a mentor of mine, in more ways than one, a Zen mentor, and also a user experience mentor, a research mentor. His name is Kosetsu Earl, and we are all part of the same Greater Silent Thunder Order Sangha, and he is working to get his brown robes, which is not a perspective we've had on the show yet. You know, you're pursuing a larger path. We're just sort of like, lay members at this point, and even what we're doing, the amount of meditation we're doing, it requires a lot of balance with all the stuff that we still have as responsibilities. And I know you're not like retired, you're still working, and you still do like so many other things.
That's very true. Yeah. And that's, that's one of the things that I'm very happy to share and talk about, because everybody has to deal with that. I think that is a major challenge in propagation of Zen in the West right now, is that the vast majority of us are householders. We aren't in that monastic setting, which is, to our point of view, kind of an artificial setting, right? Where your schedule is cleared, your tasks are not maybe completely cleared, but, very clearly defined. This is what work you do when you work to support the Sangha, and the rest of the time you dedicate to your practice. Whereas for us, we have to figure that out. And it's unique and different for everybody.
One of the things I can't stop thinking about as we explore this topic and kind of plumb the depths of householder practice as a central Zen practice for, well, at least our tradition, if not like all of American Zen sort of being reinvented as this householder practice. One of the things that keeps striking me is how fantastic that sounds. Like, God, what I wouldn't do to have the schedule of a monk and the responsibilities of a monk, and like the clarity of what's going to happen in a given day that a monk has. And it's not like I would necessarily think of the practice done at a monastery as a walk in the park, but the level of rigor and order and structure in the monastery sounds like a relief compared to the chaos that I have to navigate in order to maintain my practice. And, on one level, I think that was the idea behind the monastic structure, that there's too many distractions, and maybe in more of a classical Buddhist sense, like there's too many passions and distractions and material concerns for the householder life to really delve into the practice. And so the monastery was created as an institution to enable people to reach deep depths of practice that weren't possible in that world. But I kind of feel like Zen flipped that on its head and made sort of everything that happens to you into an opportunity for practice in such a way that it really should be amenable to the life as a householder. Mm-hmm. But it still doesn't seem like people have really integrated that idea into the way that they practice. How's that showed up for you?
Well, let me just go back historically a little bit, just to kind of talk about how my path developed, if I may.
Yeah.
I don't really feel like I chose it. It's not like I started saying, okay, my ambition is to become a brown robe priest or something like that. I think everybody's practice evolves over time. What do I need to focus on now? Do I need to focus on my meditation, my Buddha practice? Do I need to study, the Dharma practice aspect? Do I need to do precepts work or really focus on those kinds of things? Do I need to be of service to others to focus more on Sangha practice? And I certainly have shifted my focus over time, kind of just what I felt I needed to do, what I had to offer, what I could do. And it was when I started shifting my focus more towards what can I do to support others in their practice, that I really started getting more involved. And I moved back to Raleigh, North Carolina, where I went to university at North Carolina State University. And I thought, gee, I wonder if there's a Buddhist group on campus, and could I do anything to help with them? And to keep the story very short, I did. I served as Zen chaplain for 4 years or so. I just went and sat with the group and kind of introduced myself and who I was. A new person shows up. Who are you? What are you doing here? And you look older than the average student. And I explained that I was a previous student, and they said, "Oh, would you give some Dharma talks, or would you give meditation instruction?" Certainly, I'll do that. Then, could you lead a retreat for us? And I said, certainly, I'll do that. So it just kind of grew and grew in terms of what I was offering them. And that really is kind of the path of, service, of becoming a priest, really. That was when Sensei said, what you're doing is really kind of black robe priest role. So I encourage you to pursue that kind of credentialing. Matsuoka Roshi said that in the West, credentialing is very important. And he encouraged Elliston Roshi to go through the ordination and the proper credentialing and things like that. So now he's doing that for his students. Both times that he did that, it caught me by surprise. So this summer, I was having Dokusan with him, as I try to do regularly. And he said, I think you're ready to sew your brown robe if you want to. And I was just surprised. It completely caught me off guard, because I'm just doing my thing, supporting the Sangha in the ways that I can. And, he has often said that those kinds of, I don't want to use the word advancements, but, that kind of progressing along the path is kind of a recognition of where you are, not permission of okay, now you can go and do this thing. It caught me by surprise, which is why I kind of chuckled when I saw your question about, well, when did you choose to pursue the brown robe path? It's like, well, I didn't really, and now I'm considering that very carefully in terms of, okay, if I'm going to do that, what does that mean? What will my role be? Which again is, I think, one of the wonderful things about modern Western Zen and the householder's path is, it's not necessarily predefined in terms of it's been this way for centuries, and so this is the only way that role can look, right? Now we can define that, and Sensei has been very supportive as I've been kind of exploring that concept of, okay, if I do this, I need to know what will my role be, and we have the flexibility. And since the Silent Thunder Order is actively trying to help evolve that model for the West of the householder's path, that also means we have to be more engaged. In the traditional model, you could just show up at the monastery and they told you what to do. And I know that's an oversimplification, doing a disservice to somebody somewhere, but part of what our householder's path is, we have to be actively engaged in defining, what does that path look like? Not only how do I accomplish it, but in terms of what shape and form do I want it to take?
And Kosetsu, when you told me that you were going to start working on your brown robe, something that you brought up was like, okay, that means that you have to do certain things. You have to go on retreats and everything. And I know that was sort of a concern in that, you have to rearrange your life a little bit to be able to fit that into your schedule. What was that like?
So yes, traditionally Ango was one, if I'm remembering correctly, one continuous 90-day period. And I think that corresponded in the ancient days to the rainy season, right? Where it was hard to travel around and things like that. So you just stayed at one central location with your, your whoever was sponsoring you in those times, whoever would feed the Sangha and things like that. So again, we are trying to build in some flexibility there where now I can do it in 3 30-day periods. I mean, I think we need to keep some level of intensity, right? So a 30-day intense period, I think, makes great sense. I've spoken with my family. They're very supportive. I've spoken with my employer and my boss, and they're very supportive. And I've spoken with the Sangha in terms of coordinating with everybody, and we've kind of set up the schedule of, I'm going to do a 30-day period in the fall of 2021, another one in the spring of 2022, and another one in the fall of 2022. So those three together will fulfill my 90-day ongo period. And the other thing is, it's not just time, but what am I doing at that time? I will be shuso, I will be head monk. I have to define my program of what is my offering to the Sangha and kind of introduce myself and make myself widely available to the Sangha. At that time, I have to be, leading a lot of the programs and activities at the Zen Center during that time. So there's definitely a training program, but there's a strong element of I need to define what that is and what that will look like, which is closely related to what do I want my role to be.
There's a tension there, I feel like, between the rigor, the intensity, to use the word that you used, that is required not just in terms of deepening your practice or something, but in actively concentrating on defining your new role, and the stuff that you have to kind of come back out of that and deal with between these 30-day periods. Or does that feel like a tension to you? Does it feel compromised in any way?
It doesn't feel compromised, and I actually think that tension is a creative tension. I think it can be channeled to be a very positive energy. So when I look at my path in the past, I've never lived, well, for a period of about 18 months, I lived in Atlanta, 2002, 2003, and that's when I discovered the Atlanta Soto Zen Center. And since then, I've not really lived close to a center. So I've always been kind of a remote practitioner. And that has forced me to look at how do I want to define my own path. In various jobs, I did a lot of business travel. So I would go to the Zen Center of Los Angeles for Zazenkai when I went to LA. And I went to the Mountains and Rivers Order in Mount Trimper, New York for a retreat when I lived in New England and things like that. Since I didn't have a Sangha to go to, I kind of would build my own group. That's why I went to North Carolina State University and served as a chaplain there to work with a student group there. I have offered morning sitting meditations at my workplace, and I've given lunch and learns on how to meditate. Since I didn't have a group I could go to, I several times tried to form my own group. And that's kind of, in my mind, that is a really pretty neat aspect of having to figure out your path for yourself. So yes, I think there's a tension there, but I think it can be a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very Elliston Roshi way of looking at it too, I feel like. To sort of create tension deliberately between the way things used to be and the way and maybe total chaos, and then see how it shakes out in a kind of more robust, resilient way than it would have been if we just sort of followed the rule book or something. But I'm starting to pick up maybe a sense that kind of figuring it out is in some way a role of yours in Zen. Figuring out how to adapt the practice to different situations and figure it out for yourself and help others do the same. Does that resonate? Does that seem like something to do with like why the robe is going to suit you?
Absolutely, that resonates, because one of the practices I've taken up in the pandemic is journaling. And I've always felt that I've never understood something as well as when I had to explain it to others, right? And when just the simple act of journaling, forcing myself to put my vague thoughts into words, is explaining it, even if only to myself. And recently, what I've written while examining this question in recent months is when I look back at my history, whether it was, supporting the online presence of the Silent Thunder Order and the Atlanta Soto Zen Center for over a decade, helping at a university and in the workplace, that those were all helping to adapt to modern life in a non-traditional setting.
For me personally, having the Sangha close and being able to go there frequently is a huge factor as to how I keep practicing in the first place. And, since you've had to experience the Sangha from a virtual space for so long, I'm curious how you feel like that differs, or if you feel like this is, an opportunity to have more of a virtual space? I don't know. I'm just curious about your experience with it.
Yes, I mean, back in, oh gosh, when I left Atlanta, I moved to Switzerland. And Elliston Roshi, very graciously reached out to me and said, we have telephones, we have internet technology. You don't have to disappear. We can keep in touch. And I just thought that was so wonderful that he offered to do that. And, we set up Dokusan in those days. I would find local sitting groups in Basel and Zurich. But I've always said that, for a Western mind to follow the Dharma is challenging enough without taking a sharp left turn through Swiss German. So I would go sit with them. But in terms of Dharma study and Dokusan, I did that with Elliston Roshi. That was such an incredible gift to me that he offered to be able to stay in touch and to be his student remotely. And I think that so influenced me that I want to help facilitate that for others as well, not to have to be just fortunate enough to live next to a formal Zen group, which is still pretty rare in America.
It is. And it's something that I definitely am glad that we do have all these online offerings now, and they seem to be growing, especially with the pandemic, and that more people like you can get engaged with the larger Sangha without having to live like right next to one like I do, which I feel very fortunate I do. And I feel in some ways like, am I lacking that I couldn't be like a virtual member like some of the other people? But I digress.
Well, so it's something we've talked about before, Inga and I, is how beneficial it's always awful to talk about the pandemic as having any benefits, but the fact that so much of the practice has had to move online has equalized the affiliates and ASZC in this way that has made it possible for us to participate almost on an equal footing with the Sanghas all over the place. And I wasn't even here yet when I joined. I was in Philadelphia, so I was participating fully remotely also. And then, so by the time I did get here, I still felt like I had already developed relationships with people, in Falmouth and in Montana, and like I was sitting with those people. And so, we've talked about what will happen when things open up and we're able to go sit in the Zendo again. And obviously that will be a huge benefit. I really look forward to having that opportunity, but I also don't want to miss out on the ability to sit with the other Sanghas. And I want to find, maybe this is a good opportunity for the three of us as people who all work on kind of the online communications aspect of what we do to talk about that a little bit. Like, I don't want to lose the opportunity to participate remotely with the whole network. And we have this network model as a Sangha, which I think is pretty unique also. And you have been instrumental in sort of setting that up. How are we ahead of the curve like that we were able to just spin it up and keep going and bring all the affiliates in? Has that been part of the thinking for a long time, that we want to be able to interact that way?
That has been an intention of mine since I became involved. My gosh, I was still living in Switzerland when I took over the website. So that's at least like 12, 13, maybe 14 years ago now. And that was, I'm a tech nerd. I enjoy that. I wanted to support the online presence there, the spreading of Elliston Roshi's teachings through the Dharma Bites, posting those online. And in those days you didn't have so many services available. So we had a forum on the website, an old style website forum. Cool. And things like that. Shared a lot of documents there. Some of those kind of have changed and evolved over time as other services became available. So a lot of that capability in a small organization just depends on members that you have who have an interest, who have a skill, who have the dedication to make it happen. Mm-hmm. So it was always my intent, and it became a formal part of the Silent Thunder's orders intent when we formed the STO. Mm-hmm. I was on the board when we founded the STO, and that was an intentional part of it. So
that was 10 years ago. So the opportunity, the ability to think of it as a distributed thing with online infrastructure supporting that was clearly visible, if not fully manifest in sort of the way we do it now. So that idea of a network that where the people can still know each other and practice together was probably more or less real even then.
Yes, and especially I think for myself, I can say that was clearly informed by my experience with Elliston Roshi, where he was supporting my practice. I was able to be his student, even though I was an ocean away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been so grateful for the sort of willingness of the people to participate in something like this. And when, logging on a Sunday and there being 20 people there feels so good to me. And obviously it's out of necessity these days, but I don't know. There's always seemed to be something a little discordant about it to me, that like Buddhists are so willing to sit in front of computers, and that nobody has said anything like that. It's not like that's actually a thing that I've encountered here, but there's this part of me that feels like we should, being present is sort of resistant to that idea of wearing headphones and having a computer screen in the Zendo. But it's melting away for me now. I mean, do you have feelings about that as a technology person who's also a longtime Buddhist practitioner?
Yes, I think that, I love sitting in the Zendo.
Mm-hmm.
There's a special feeling for being in a room full of people being intentionally silent and aware. That's fantastic. But our practice is also learning to deal with what is and dealing with the constraints that we're bound within. Mm-hmm. And right now, that constraint is a pandemic. But we can also leverage that to be more inclusive, So if you're used to sitting in a Zendo, you can say, oh, sitting in front of a monitor just doesn't have the same feeling. But if you've been practicing alone and not with a group, to be able to practice with a group, even if not physically in the same presence, that is a wonderful feeling, So it just depends on your perspective, and part of what our practice does is allow us to kind of be aware of the limitations of our perspective and adopt a broader perspective and adapt.
I was just going to say that, since I talk about disabled people a lot too, that there's another benefit that not just people who are far away, but sometimes people who are disabled can't leave their house as easily as other people. And, this technology can also afford that type of inclusivity as well.
Well, and I want to say, especially during the pandemic, so many of us, we are constrained by our compassion as well, not wanting to spread infection to others, not want to put others at risk, not wanting to shame others by, well, I show up physically, why can't you, or anything like that.
Yeah.
I just really appreciate that so much. I have not participated as much in the online offerings as I would like to, just because I work with it all day. I'm kind of sick of sitting in front of the monitor. But the times that I have, I've always had this good feeling of, oh, I should do this more often.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There's so many ways that the online offerings can kind of bring us together, because although you are like a mentor of mine, I've never actually met you in person. So our entire relationship is built off of our experiences with each other, through Zoom and Google Meets and email and everything. And I still feel like, we're friends. It didn't stifle the relationship or anything. So it's cool that you can have a mentor that's 2 states away and not in your actual vicinity. We're both on the Silent Thunder Order Communications Committee. You have talked about the website a little bit, and that you were also a big part of redesigning it the way it is. That better fits in the integration of all the surrounding sanghas, that they're on the schedule now, and that people can sign up and actually experience other places around the U.S. that are part of the Silent Thunder Order. Kiyosaku and I both actually participated in a Just It Saturday retreat together. And where was it?
That was at Mission Mountain in Montana.
Yeah, and we live in Atlanta, so that was actually a really cool experience too.
And it allows for more specialization. If you're really into chanting, we have a group that does chanting. If you're really into study, we have a study group, and you can't, it's just hard to have that many offerings in one physical location, right? When you broaden your base, you broaden not only the accessibility, but also the opportunity for people to contribute.
Mm-hmm. The thing that's coming out to me though about, I mean, it's not surprising to me that we ended up talking a lot about technology and the way that it facilitates, well, everything, but including the Sangha. What's coming out for me in the way we're talking about it though is that it's really central to the Dharma of what we do. The way that our Sangha is structured in order to serve its participants and propagate Zen and the teachings and practices that we, live by. That philosophy is manifest in the way that our technology is organized and the things that we prioritize and the things that we've set up, and it's built into the very structure of the organization that we're distributed in that way, and it's very forward thinking. The quote that comes to mind that Sensei always pulls out from Matsuoka Roshi is that Zen is always contemporary. But in a way, we're also kind of putting forward a new version that Zen is almost futuristic. Zen is forward looking, because we were ready for this crazy new change in the way that life was going to work.
Well, to bring it back to the point you made earlier about kind of a dynamic tension, right? There's value in the old traditions. That's why they're traditions. They're kind of time tested, but our practice drives us to always be open to what is effective now, what is useful here and now.
Householders is a production of the Atlanta Soto Zen Center in Atlanta, Georgia, and the Silent Thunder Order. Find us on the web at aszc.org.
Our Sangha depends on your support. You can donate by PayPal to donate at storder.org. Gasho.